What if the absolute greatest thing you could ever do for your creativity is just watch your physical body fall completely apart?
Yeah, just completely surrender.
Right, like surrender your ambitions and proudly become absolutely terrible at your art.
It sounds totally backwards.
It really does. But today, we are doing a deep dive into the unpublished, fiercely rebellious thoughts of a man who did exactly that.
And it is a fascinating manuscript we're looking at today.
It really is. I want you to picture an 83-year-old man. He's sitting on this comfortable, sun-drenched terrace in Pacific Palisades, California.
So beautiful setting.
Oh, gorgeous. Golden hour. He's staring out at the Pacific Ocean, which, by the way, he considers to be completely fraudulently named.
I love that detail.
Yeah, he actually points out in the source material that Magellan was a total fool to cross it on a calm day and label the most violent, unpredictable body of water on Earth peaceful.
Well, it's such a classic Henry Miller observation.
Exactly. Because this old man on the terrace is Henry Miller. But he's traded those starving, vibrant, bedbug-ridden streets of 1930s Paris for a soft cushion.
And the distant, air-conditioned hum of traffic on the coast highway.
Yeah. We are looking at this heavily fictionalized manuscript of his titled Under the Rooftops of Nowhere.
And the mission of this deep dive really is to explore the raw, unfiltered reflections of a man who is facing the ultimate silencer, which is old age.
The ultimate silencer.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a writer who spent 50 years basically screaming his truth into the void, right? And now he's finally being forced to just stop and listen to the silence.
It's a profound exploration of art, regret, and what it actually takes to be present in the world.
Truly present, yeah.
So whether you're 25 years old and you're hustling to build a career, terrified of falling behind, or you're just someone trying to find a single moment of peace in a really loud world, this deep dive is your shortcut.
We're going to unpack what Miller calls the cosmic joke of ambition.
The cosmic joke, yeah.
And learn how to stop running before your own legs physically force you to.
Which is exactly where Miller starts, right? The physical reality of aging. And he paints this hilarious but frankly brutal picture.
Oh, he pulls no punches.
None. He doesn't describe getting older as this gentle fading of the light. He says his own body is a fascist dictator.
Fascist dictator.
Issuing these absolute non-negotiable demands that he just can't ignore anymore.
Like his right hip?
Yes. His right hip has literally seceded from the Union.
It just declared independence.
Set up its own government and went to war with the concept of stairs.
Which is such a brilliant way to describe joint pain.
And his eyes, too. He notes they've turned the entire physical world into a blurry Monet painting.
Everything is soft edges.
Yeah, Impressionism. But, and this is the crazy part hidden inside this rapid physical erosion, is this immense, almost overwhelming sense of gratitude.
Because of his tongue.
Exactly. Amidst the betrayal of his joints and his vision, his tongue has remained completely loyal.
Can still taste the wine.
Right. He can sit on that terrace and perfectly taste all the complex notes of a glass of French Burgundy.
And that physical erosion, it's actually the catalyst for a massive psychological shift for him.
How so?
Well, when your body fails, when that dictator takes away your ability to conquer physical space or work 14-hour days, your ego loses its primary weapon.
Right.
You physically just don't have the energy to sustain the illusion of control anymore.
The illusion of control, wow.
Yeah, and Miller introduces this brilliant concept to explain it. He calls it the laser mind versus the lantern mind.
The laser mind.
Right. He describes the mind of a young man as a laser. It is intensely focused, driven by ambition, and it can burn a hole straight through solid steel to get exactly what it wants.
But because it's a laser.
It completely misses the periphery. The young man is dense. He's this closed fist of wanting.
But the old man is a window.
Exactly. The old man has developed the lantern mind. It doesn't point at any specific goal. It's diffuse.
It just wanders.
Wanders aimlessly. It casts this soft light in all directions simultaneously, illuminating all those quiet corners of memory that the laser mind discarded as useless.
Useless to its ambitions, right. I kind of think about it like a classic car. You know, the engine knocks, the suspension is shot.
The doors rattle when you hit a bump.
Exactly. To a mechanic, it's falling apart. But the person driving it has finally stopped treating it as a commuter vehicle.
We're not trying to beat traffic anymore.
Right. They aren't frantically checking their watch to get to a destination. They're finally just cruising for the pure, unadulterated joy of the ride, feeling the wind.
Just being in the car.
Yeah. But okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't it incredibly convenient for Henry Miller to claim that ambition and anxiety just fall away only after he has become a world-famous, financially secure author?
Oh, sure.
Like, it is very easy to tell people to stop striving when you are already standing at the finish line holding the trophy.
You would completely think so, right?
Yeah.
It sounds exactly like the privilege of success. Yeah. But Miller actually argues the complete opposite in the text. The money and the fame didn't buy him peace. The failing hips did.
The hips.
Yeah, he explicitly states that you cannot achieve this transparency at 25, no matter how much you meditate or intellectualize it.
Interesting.
This clarity is the direct mechanical product of erosion. You have to be sanded down layer by layer by what he calls 1,000 griefs and 1,000 ecstasies.
Sanded down.
The peace doesn't come from winning the race. The peace comes from your legs giving out, forcing you to sit down on the side of the track and finally just look at the scenery.
And the fascinating thing is you can't really apply a soft, diffuse lantern mind to a medium that requires laser precision.
Right, like writing.
Exactly. The typewriter was Miller's laser. It demanded structure and arguments and narrative momentum.
It's very rigid.
So as his brain shifted into this lantern state, he actively rebelled against his own life's work.
He had to find a new medium.
He had to find a space where he could just be a window, which perfectly explains his wild pivot late in life toward watercolor painting.
A pivot where he proudly embraced being absolutely terrible.
Oh, terrible.
He completely abandoned all pursuit of mastery.
There's this incredibly vivid scene in the manuscript where this earnest young writer from the Midwest makes a pilgrimage to visit Miller.
You can just picture this kid.
Oh, perfectly. The beard, the corduroy jacket with the leather elbow patches.
Clutching a little tape recorder like it's a sacred artifact.
Yes. And he asks the great Henry Miller for his ultimate advice on how to be a writer. And Miller doesn't tell him to read the classics.
Or to revise his drafts.
No. He looks at him and says, paint. Specifically, paint madly.
He's basically instructing him to strip away the ego of the professional.
Right.
Miller himself was doing this up in Big Sur. He had zero formal technique. He describes splashing colors onto paper, creating these flowers that looked like violent explosions in a paint factory.
Chaos.
Total chaos. He was painting with the reckless, unself-conscious joy of a toddler.
Because he was desperate to escape what he calls the tyranny of meaning.
The tyranny of meaning.
Yeah. Writing, over a 50-year career, had become this totalitarian dictator in his mind. Every single word had to earn its keep.
Every sentence had to advance an argument.
Or reveal some profound truth. The sheer architecture of language was exhausting him.
And splashing raw color onto paper taught him that art doesn't have to be a monument to the artist.
It doesn't have to mean anything.
Exactly. It freed him from the burden of himself. And to explain this, Miller introduces this profound distinction between creating from the spring versus creating from the bucket.
I cannot stop thinking about this analogy. It's so good.
The spring is that dark, primordial, underground flow of the human unconscious.
Right.
When you create from the spring, you aren't really doing the work. You were just acting as a channel for something ancient and wild to come to the surface.
But the bucket is technique.
The bucket is craft. It is dead, stagnant water that you carry from a well. The bucket will keep you hydrated. Sure, it'll keep you alive.
Yeah.
But drinking from the wild spring is what makes you actually want to be alive.
It's the difference between a stressed-out architect and a kid in a sandbox.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Like, writing a novel is being that architect building a skyscraper. You're bound by the laws of physics, blueprints, zoning laws.
You have to make sure the whole structure doesn't collapse.
It is stressful, highly managed work, but painting badly was just Miller joyfully digging a hole in the dirt with a plastic shovel, and he just does not care if it caves in.
Right.
But let me push back on this anti-technique stance for a second.
Right.
If learning the craft is just accumulating dead bucket water, why do we spend so much of our lives learning the rules at all?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, why do we have entire university departments, MFA programs, corporate training seminars entirely dedicated to structure and form?
Well, if we look at the psychological mechanism Miller is pointing to here, he argues that civilization heavily invests in the bucket because it is absolutely terrified of the spring.
Terrified of it.
A human being operating in a state of pure, unrestricted creative flow is incredibly dangerous to a structured society.
Because they're unpredictable.
Exactly. They can't be easily categorized or controlled or marketed to.
Wow.
The true artist's messy, rule-breaking, chaotic NO is the canary in the coal mine against a capitalist machine that demands absolute conformity and efficiency.
Which brings us to a childhood memory that Miller just obsesses over in the text.
Oh, the circus.
A memory that perfectly captures the struggle against the machine. He remembers going to Madison Square Garden as a boy and watching a circus clown.
Right.
And the clown didn't juggle, he didn't do acrobatics. His entire act consisted of simply trying to sit down in a chair.
Just sitting down.
Well, but every single time he bent his knees to sit, the chair would suddenly move and the clown would fall flat on his back.
And the crowd in the arena is just howling with laughter.
Of course.
But the young Henry Miller is sitting there realizing, with terrifying clarity, that this isn't a comedy routine.
No.
This is the tragic reality of the human condition.
We spend our entire lives trying to sit down, and the universe keeps moving the chair.
Every single time.
You save up for the house, and the roof caves in. You build the career, and the industry collapses.
You find the perfect relationship, and the person leaves.
Exactly. And the genius of the clown isn't in the falling down. Anyone can fall down. Gravity does that for free.
Right.
The profound grace of the clown is the unreasonable, entirely unjustifiable hope required to brush the dirt off his pants, look at the chair, and try to sit down one more time.
And that refusal to stay on the ground is an act of spiritual rebellion.
It really is.
And it's exactly this rebellious desire for a life that embraces that unpredictable moving chair that fuels Miller's fierce, visceral critique of the modern American lifestyle.
Oh man, he goes so hard on America here. He draws this sharp contrast between his years in 1930s Paris and his life in America. Yeah, in Paris, he describes walking for hours from Montparnasse to Montmartre with literally nowhere to go.
He wasn't tracking his steps.
No, he wasn't commuting. He talks about the absolute sacredness of buying a steaming French baguette on the street. He elevates the baker to a priest.
And calls the oven an altar.
Exactly.
And then he turns his gaze to America and just deeply mourns its spiritual impoverishment.
The tomato.
Yes. He singles out the American tomato, calling it a vegetable void.
A vegetable void.
Because it's a bright red, perfectly spherical illusion of food, grown in a factory to survive a 1,000-mile truck ride, but containing absolutely zero flavor.
It's all aesthetics, no substance.
Exactly. He compares California wine to an industrial solvent engineered in a laboratory.
Ouch.
Whereas he views French wine as something violently born from the earth.
He's talking about the concept of terroir, right? The idea that a living thing must have a deep, traceable connection to its specific soil, climate, history.
Yes.
And he applies this to humans, too. He despises the American cult of productivity.
The cult of productivity.
He argues that a man who has a destination, a man who knows exactly where he will be at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, is already dead.
He's become a mathematical vector.
Exactly. But the man with nowhere to go is truly alive to the possibilities of the universe.
Which leads to his thoughts on eating alone.
Yes. He emphasizes this by describing the profound intimacy of eating a simple bowl of spaghetti aglio e olio entirely alone.
Just pasta, garlic, oil.
Yeah. When you are alone, you can actually taste the sharp bite of the garlic, the richness of the olive oil. You're doing it without the static noise of another person across the table talking about the weather or the stock market.
It is a radical, almost aggressive defense of unproductivity.
It is. And if you're listening to this on your commute to a job that drains you, or if you're looking at a perfectly color-coded digital calendar that leaves you feeling deeply hollow,
Miller is speaking directly to you.
he is saying that your life's optimization is the exact mechanism that is killing your joy. You're tracking your macros, you're managing your inbox, you're successfully arriving at all your destinations, but you are eating vegetable voids.
Wow.
But again, I have to question his reliability here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is Miller just wearing the ultimate pair of rose-tinted glasses? Is he romanticizing starvation and poverty and bedbugs in Paris simply because he happened to survive them?
That is the crucial counter-argument, and it's a fair one.
Yeah.
But when you dig into his philosophy, he isn't actually praising the suffering of poverty itself.
Okay.
He is praising the availability that having nothing created within him,
Ah, availability.
having zero money, zero professional reputation, zero destination. It stripped away all the insulation. It made him an empty vessel.
An empty vessel.
And by emptying himself, he became a perfect human antenna.
I like that.
He was able to vibrate to subtle cosmic frequencies that a successful man rushing to a board meeting can never pick up.
Because the successful man is already full of his own noise.
Exactly. America's obsession with efficiency fills the vessel to the brim, effectively killing our capacity for awe.
We are so terrified of the dark that we pave over the wilderness and trade the Milky Way for fluorescent streetlights.
Precisely. But, Miller doesn't let himself off the hook here either.
No, he doesn't.
He fully acknowledges the horrific collateral damage of living this wildly.
Right.
Acting as a human antenna, prioritizing his unrestricted creative flow over absolutely everything else, it left a devastating trail of wreckage in his personal life.
Devastating. He confesses this with a brutality that is honestly hard to read.
It's very raw.
He reflects on his father, Heinrich. Heinrich was a tailor in Brooklyn who was widely considered a pathetic failure by his wife and his community.
It's just a total failure in their eyes.
But Miller, in his old age, realizes that his father was actually a saint.
A saint.
Why? Because Heinrich had conquered the toxic need to be important. He simply sat in his shop and made beautifully crafted suits for people who didn't even appreciate them.
And that realization of quiet dignity stands in stark contrast to Miller's own life.
Stark contrast.
This is brought to the surface during a conversation with Claudine, a French translator who visits him in California. She forces him to confront the ghost of June.
June, his second wife.
His great, chaotic muse, the woman he wrote a million words about.
June was a woman who hit his life like a tornado tearing through a trailer park.
She really was. And Claudine points out a devastating truth. Miller only ever loved June from the outside.
From the outside.
He pressed his face against the glass window of her being, marveling at the storm inside. But he never actually understood her interior life.
Oh, man.
His legendary writing wasn't actually about who she was. It was entirely about what she did to him.
But the absolute most painful moment of the manuscript is the letter he mentally composes to his estranged son, Tony.
Yes.
Miller strips away all his literary defenses here. He confesses the brutal arithmetic of the artist's life. He states, flatly, "You cannot be a great artist and a good father."
That's a heavy line.
It's so heavy. He describes the creation of art as a roaring furnace. And to keep that fire burning hot enough to produce light, it requires constant fuel.
It will burn whatever you throw into it.
Whatever you throw into it, your sanity, your loyalty, your marriages, and yes, your children.
He maps out this painful geometry of fatherhood. It's a circle that fundamentally cannot be closed.
Think about standing right next to the base of a massive lighthouse.
Okay.
The beam of light it produces is magnificent. It cuts through miles of dense fog. It saves ships from crashing into the rocks. It creates this transcendent, life-saving illumination for the world.
Right.
But if you are the wife or the son standing directly at the base of that lighthouse, you are standing entirely in the dark.
The light sweeps right over your head.
Exactly. Miller is confessing that in order to illuminate the world with his writing, he had to leave the people closest to him in the shadows.
Wow.
Does creating transcendent art always require this kind of selfish, destructive, collateral damage?
Well, Miller seems to conclude that it does, or at least it absolutely did for him. Yeah. The striking thing about this letter is the utter lack of defensiveness. He completely accepts that his son was entirely right to reject him.
He doesn't fight it at all.
No. He recognizes that the love of a writer is a broken thing. It flickers, it throws terrifying shadows on the wall, and it almost always illuminates the wrong corner of the room.
He completely empties himself of his legendary ego in this confession.
He does. And it is only after making these confessions, after completely emptying the vessel of his ego and his defenses, that he's finally prepared to confront the ultimate silence of the universe.
Right. He walks out into his garden.
He looks up and he laments the night sky in Los Angeles. Because of the city's pornography of light, as he calls it, he can only count about 30 stars.
A pathetic fraction of the vibrant Milky Way he used to sleep under in Big Sur.
But then, standing there doing absolutely nothing, he locks eyes with a hummingbird.
The hummingbird.
It's hovering just 3 feet from his face. For a split second, they share this profound, silent, interspecies recognition of simply existing in the same space.
But almost immediately, Miller notes the original sin of the human mind.
The compulsion to name things.
Yes.
This is a stunning philosophical pivot. He realizes that the exact moment his brain labels that tiny vibrating creature a trochility, or recalls its average wingbeat frequency, he murders the wonder of the encounter.
He murders it.
The intellectual mind acts as a taxidermist. It converts a living, breathing presence into a dead, categorized concept.
It's the modern equivalent of being at the most incredible concert of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the bass is vibrating in your chest, the crowd is unified, and instead of just listening to the music and experiencing the transcendence, you pull out your smartphone to take a blurry, blown-out video that you are never ever going to watch again.
Never.
You killed the reality of the moment in order to document it.
Exactly.
But wait a minute. If naming things and describing them with language ruins the magic, isn't Henry Miller completely invalidating his own 50-year career as one of the world's most famous writers?
He is.
Yeah.
And he is entirely self-aware of the comedy of his own existence here.
The cosmic joke.
He calls this his grand contradiction. He realizes he is the clown. He knows perfectly well that the net of language he uses to try and catch the truth has massive gaping holes in it.
The fish will always swim right through.
But he has spent his entire life standing by the water, casting that defective net anyway.
Because the casting itself is the point.
Exactly. The act of casting the net, the unreasonable, absurd, beautiful hope that maybe, just maybe, the words will somehow hold the living reality this time. That is the entire point of the human endeavor.
It is.
Eventually, he looks away from the garden, out at the vast ocean, and realizes that the boundary between himself and that water is a complete illusion.
Right.
He is not the ocean. He is just a temporary, beautiful wave that is swelled up for a brief moment and must inevitably crash and dissolve back into the whole.
We're an incredible intellectual journey.
It really is.
I mean, we started with this rebellious, decaying body, the fascist dictator hip forcing him into submission. We watched him abandon the laser mine for the wandering light of the lantern, realizing that true peace comes from the erosion of the ego, not from conquering the world.
And the awful realization of the wreckage he left behind to make his art.
And it all culminates in this profound realization of being nothing more than a temporary wave returning to the water.
Yeah.
It is a powerful reminder to all of us. You need to embrace your own lantern mind. You need to log off, sit down, and savor a real tomato before you lose the ability to taste it.
And find some grace and humor when the chair you're trying to sit in inevitably moves.
Exactly. It's a masterclass in learning how to stop throwing your shoulder against a locked door, only to realize the door opens inward.
That's a great way of putting it.
But before we leave you to ponder all of this, there is one final, deeply provocative dilemma from the source material that we want to leave you with.
Yes, this is a tricky one.
Throughout this manuscript, Miller repeatedly discusses his complex, enduring relationship with the Norwegian author Knut Hamsun.
Right. Now, as we look at the historical context provided in the sources, we are confronted with a deeply uncomfortable reality.
Very uncomfortable.
Miller credits Hamsun's novel, Hunger, as the absolute catalyst that taught him how to write from the body and liberated his own voice.
But Hamsun wasn't just a brilliant novelist.
No, he was a documented Nazi sympathizer. He literally gave his Nobel Prize medal to Joseph Goebbels as a gift.
Yeah.
Our goal here isn't to validate Hamsun's history has rightfully condemned him, but rather to look at how Miller processes this impossible paradox.
Because Miller wrestles openly with this unpayable debt to a monster.
Right.
He argues that you cannot surgically separate the two halves of the man. The human will, he says, is a chaotic furnace that contains both the masterpiece and the monster.
They're ingredients boiling in the exact same stew.
Exactly. The exact same hand that wrote a transcendent masterpiece willingly shook hands with pure, unadulterated evil.
Which brings us right back to the painful complexity of the human condition.
So the lingering question we leave you with is this. Can we ever truly separate transcendent, life-changing art from the deeply flawed or even monstrous human being who created it?
It is a heavy, unresolved question.
It is. But it brings us right back to that sun-drenched terrace in Pacific Palisades.
Sitting in the moving chair.
Exactly. The universe keeps pulling the chair away. The beauty and the horror, the spring and the bucket, the light and the shadow, they are all mixed together in the same messy existence.
Yeah.
But the genius of being alive isn't in finding a chair that stays perfectly still. The genius is having the unreasonable hope to dust yourself off, look out at that fraudulently named ocean, and try to sit down one more time.